friends and fellow world builders, my name is AJ Winters and welcome back to World Builder. Today we're taking a closer inspection into our tropical region. The most beautiful and the most deadly region in Aelwyn, Kylandri. Known as the birthplace of the Ivathame, one of our homebrew races, with its colourful forests and dangerous foes. Not much is known about Kylandri yet, which means that this episode is going to be super fun as we dive into all the nitty-gritty bits, fleshing out the capital city as well as the regional flora and fauna. So let's get into it. A tropical region is defined as a region or climate that is frost-free with high enough temperatures for year-round plant growth. When we say tropical region, it may invoke images of the Amazon, the Congo Basin, or even the Australian Daintree rainforest, all of which classify as tropical or subtropical moist broadleaf forests. But unlike their seasonal tropical forest brethren that have a rotating wet and dry season where leaves fall during the dry and cooler winters, tropical moist broadleaf forests stay perpetually warm and wet in climate. Meaning, not only is there no dry season because the precipitation remains constant, but also leaf loss and regrowth are staggered. The canopy is made up of an incredible biodiversity of trees, each of which operates on their own schedule. And because of the year-round plant growth, the forests are incredibly dense, meaning that from above, the canopy appears to be a sea of unending green. And below that canopy, it can be varying degrees of humid. But not only that, there are different layers to the canopy as well, from 75-meter tall trees to small trees with vines, and then ferns, flowers, and thick tree roots in the ground with the leaf litter and damp soil. So to turn this to Aelwyn, I love the idea of having a semi-humid, moist broadleaf rainforest covering the scope of Kylandri, with weaving rivers coursing through like veins. Over on our weekly world building streams on twitch.tv/winterstales, we've talked about how Kylandri is incredibly colourful, with trees of reds, oranges, blues, lilacs, and varying shades of green. We've also discussed the idea that the rivers are semi-luminescent, with algae that glows beneath the surface, meaning that the rivers dance from the reflection of the colourful trees above and the lights underneath. Thank you so much to More Ithilid for that solution to why the rivers glow. But what do we know about Kylandri so far? We've released 3 things on this series. 1. The king of Kylandri, Utog Aramon, is an Ivathame that is growing into their throne. These 3 cards has given me such a clear idea of this king. I think being that they are Ivathame, maybe they have started to grow into their throne? They are wounded, so they have been sitting for such a long time that their plants and roots and flowers have started to grow into the ground and the walls behind them. They are fixed to their throne in some way and they have to leave in order to save Kylandri. I love that. I love the idea of a tapestry of flowers and roots and vines that is the king growing into the throne that they sit on. Okay. 2, we know about Ancestor Day, a particular grove of trees made from the lucky Ivathame that make it to their final stages of life, pass on their souls and memories into physical trees, and those that seek answers visit them once a year.
Beyond the city of Dresden is a dedicated land to the kings and ancestors of old, where great trees have grown from past Ivathame. Ancestor Day falls just after harvest, where the Ivathame gather the fallen leaves from their ancestors' trees, taking this time to commune with them for new insights, knowledge, or advice. It is limited to only 1 day a year so that the dead may rest.
And 3, we've made mention of the brass towers, built in devotion to Ethra, the god of knowledge. As the tree line of this magical forest meets the Gildrick Sea, 3 brass towers rise up into the sky, white beaches beyond, and a field of blood-red flowers around the base of the construction. There, one may give their blood in exchange for knowledge. The more unknown the knowledge, the more blood it's worth. The devotees of Ethra work inside of these towers like monks, dedicated to preserving the brass structures as well as assisting the growth of knowledge. So let's start there. Cam Xavier from our Discord chat suggested that these brass towers house thick, winding, bramble-like vines that actually contain the knowledge itself within their structure, and that the blood feeds and nurtures the vines instead. I am very interested in this idea, but when I picture the vines, I see an extremely large python-like situation, like winding smooth tree trunks snaking up and around the inside of these towers. Perhaps they are encased in brass to protect them, as they are born from Ethra's magic. Or maybe, when they were originally constructed, they were to lock the vines away from curious ongoers who might access dangerous information. Yeah. And soon the devotees of Ethra took over the towers and now trade in secrets and knowledge for blood. Maybe it doesn't just feed the vines, but it also feeds Ethra himself. Perhaps there's a direct link from the vines to the god, hence why the devotees are so hell-bent on protecting these towers. Perhaps even a camouflaging spell of some kind, so that you can only find the towers if you know of their precise location already. And the flowers that surround the base of the tower are blood red because they are born from each drop of blood given to the towers. Ooh, I like that. Now, going back to the king of Kylandri who is growing into his throne, as well as the elder Ivathame that grow into trees when they pass away, it's got me thinking. We have mentioned that there is something wrong with Kylandri causing the king to take action. But what if isolation suited them? What if the injury was just an excuse to stay on the throne instead of interacting with the world that they do not like? And adding to that, Serum76 asked whether the kings of old could be symbiotically connected in some way, perhaps imparting their memories into the vines that make up the walls of the throne room. And I adore this idea. Now that we know that Elder Ivathame can pass into trees, perhaps there is a grove of old kings behind the throne that is protected by a tapestry of roots and vines that only the current king can access. Now we've still got to let the old kings rest, but Sparrow Flyaway suggested that the tree vines could connect like a synapsis in a mind, passing information between them. And so, King Utog Aramon remained on their throne, connected to the kings of the past for wisdom and guidance. Maybe they believed that the best way to rule, until things started changing. This makes for a very interesting leader who we can dive back into later. But for now, let's focus in on what is happening to Kylandri. Now, I've been playing around with the idea that the reason Kylandri is so magical and colourful and dangerous is because the blood of a god spilt across the entire region during the War of the Gods. And judging by the map, the blood could come from the body that now makes up Austenite, as the mountains of Austen do border Kylandri. And we know that that body was one of the gods of magic. Actually, I've just had a thought. What if one of the magic gods died and their body makes up Austenite under the city of Austen? And maybe the mountain gods grew the mountains around the body in order to hide it or protect it. They are siblings after all, if all of the nature gods are related. That makes sense to me. So the mountain range in Aelwyn is not just out of nowhere, it was a burial ritual for the god of magic, or one of them. That not only explains Kylandri's heavy influence of magic, and danger and colour and unexplained growth, but it also gives me an idea. What if magic is fading from the region, or being drained out of it? Whether the blood is drying up or a group of people are actually harnessing the essence of Kylandri, I'm unsure. Or maybe it's even the opposite and there's too much magic flooding Kylandri. Either way, the lands are changing. The edges of the forests are dying and beasts are growing larger and more deadly. But most devastating of all, the Ivathame fields where new sproutlings are born from flowers is suffering. A generation ago, a few flower-born began not making it to full term, which we know is 2 years. But now, over 50% of the field do not survive, which is a devastating thought for all of Ivathame. Not only the parents, but those charged with protecting the field and the community, which means that many Ivathame are now moving to Crestfell to plant their seeds in the winter fields for more guarantee. But this is their home and where they'd want to raise their young. Maybe the population of Ivathame is diminishing in Kylandri. Those that don't have a spiritual or historical attachment to the lands are actually moving elsewhere. This would be a definite reason for the King of Kylandri to have concern and need to rejoin society in order to fix things. But before we fixate too much on the loss, let's actually work out what these fields look like. Ivathame are born from flowers after Ivanus, the god of fertility, planted a race in his own image. Not only did he sprout the fields, but he also planted the great tree, which is now home to the city of Dresden built within it, which we have officially named the Hallowed Oak by our Discord chat. And in the chromatic forest that surrounds it, thank you Can for that name, a field opens up. Spanning out for an acre or so under the shade of the wide-stretching canopy of frestle trees, I'll get to those in a second, are hundreds of flower buds in various stages of their incubation. There are Ivathame guard patrolling every inch around the field and Una attending to each aisle. And Una is the name I've given an Ivathame doula, nurse, doctor, or flower-born specialist, whatever you may want to call them. They tend to the buds, water them, and prune any surrounding growth. Not only that, but they'd help the petals part when an Ivathame blooms. I'd say there's an Una for every 10 buds, so you can imagine how many people are in and around this field for protection. Kopo Tojo asked an interesting question in one of our recent world-building streams. Do the Ivathame know whose child is who, or do they simply plant them and share responsibility together? I think each seed is given a space to grow and the parents or parent would know where that is. Maybe the aisles are numbered to keep track, or they might even bring a plaque with the chosen name etched in. Ivathame aren't gendered, and so their names wouldn't be either. You would be able to choose a name long before they're born. I think similarly to how elves work in D&D, however, an Ivathame may be able to choose a name when they reach a certain age or maturity. There are some Ivathame who choose to stay as one gender because they feel attachment to it. Maybe they choose their name accordingly. But because Ivathame thrive on culture and community, I would assume that they would raise or teach the sproutlings together. Perhaps there's even a sproutling's wing in the Hallowed Oak. And speaking of the Hallowed Oak, I'm picturing this great tree with a city built into it and around it. Maybe even several giant trees that weave together, with mounds covered and disguised as moss-covered tree knots with windows and doors in them, bridges and walkways leading to different parts of the city, a great 200 to 300 meter tall tree, almost the size of an average skyscraper, but wider, and inside it's hollowed out, so there's streets, houses, shops, anything you can imagine built into the inside of these trees. And this is where the king lives, somewhere safe in the center of the city, not too high in the Hollowed Oak to be attacked by the skies, and not too close to the ground to have access to the dangers of the chromatic forest either. And speaking of the chromatic forest, let's move on to the beasts. Now, we designed a creature back in episode 5 called the Death Knots. I have this idea of a giant mosquito or insect-like creature that is size comparable to a human. And that thought to me is just terrifying. Introducing Death Knots, 2 feet long insectoids with a skull-like face and a bagpipe neck that allows them to suck blood in faster. Gross. And I think these horrifying insectoid monsters originate from Kylandri. So not only are they growing bigger in recent years, but I also think they don't work alone. Introducing the Lover's Embrace, a terrifying yet beautiful bone-eating plant, disguising itself as an alluring feminine figure as well as producing some sort of alluring scent, which may just mask the rotting corpse smell. The lover's embrace draws you in using a hallucinogenic compound that activates the pleasure sensors in your brain while it consumes you and dissolves your skeleton for the calcium. The death knots are then left to a feast of whatever remains, hence why they work together. Now, not many people survived this attack, but an adventurer who did described it as the death knots hunting and herding them into the lover's embrace nest. It seems as though sentient plants and intelligent beasts now work in tandem. Absolutely horrifying. And lastly, we had a submission for a domesticated animal and/or pet for Kylandri from Milky Lens. They suggested a small fluffy ball with 3 appendages like monkey tails. Now I think I want to combine this with a previous submission from Serum, the chitterwings, and turn our fluff ball into a sugar glider of sorts, with coloured bellies to blend into the canopy as they glide. The 3 appendages then become 2 arms and a tail, with the arms having excess skin that when stretched out allows these fluff balls to glide perfectly around the capital city, which also makes them excellent messenger carriers. Serum also noted that they make a distinctive chit-chit-chit noise when annoyed or excited, and I've also noted that they only grow to the size of a netball or smaller, so these cute creatures can be everywhere. Especially since they would make for great pets for all the citizens of the Hallowed Oak, which is mainly made up of Ivathame and our bug race, which we've officially named Leonid. Given the diet of these 2 races, there would be a lot of nectar collection, as well as a few meat options for the Ivathame to keep up their iron levels, but mostly it would be nuts, fruit, and plant-based for their diet. And given the humidity of Kylandri, I think their clothing would be made from lighter materials, and unlike Crestfell, a lot more revealing. Unless you're a guard, but given how long this episode has gone for already, I think I'm going to dedicate a full episode to the fashion of Kylandri, Caldrea, and Crestfell later on. Next week, we're going to be dabbling into the seas and the Shattered Isles, which means that we've officially dipped our toe into every region of Aelwyn. I am so excited. If you want to stay up to date with all the things happening behind the scenes here at Winter's Tales, then you can follow us on all of the socials, and hit like and subscribe so that you get notified every time a new video comes out here on this channel. If you would like to join our community and be part of weekly world building prompts as well as pitch your own ideas that might end up in these videos, then you can join our Discord. Or if you would like a more personalized behind the scenes view as well as downloadable PDFs of everything we create on this channel, then you can head on over to our Patreon. We also do a weekly world building live stream every Tuesday night at 8 PM AWST on twitch.tv/winterstales. And if you like world building as much as we do, then we've also teamed up with World Anvil, an incredible online platform that helps you world build and get all of your ideas out into one place. They also have a new mind map and whiteboard feature to check out too. If you're interested, there's a link down below. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. This is all starting to come together now, and soon we'll be able to take you on a behind the scenes tour of the upcoming studio in which we'll be hosting our tabletop RPG show. But until then, I'll see you next week.